fashionable, diverse, and confident. Modern China is delivering a new image overseas through Chinese dress code, a fashionable lifestyle, and the development of Chinatowns all over the world. However, controversial perceptions of the Chinese cultural shift still exist. Does China need a particular national dress?
The universal question for the Chinese today about the dress code is whether we should have a national dress.
Asia has a unique component of culture and custom.
But I think the only danger you face, I would just say, hello, people. We've lost them because of the modern world where everyone sort of adopts modernity.
What are the new developments in Chinatowns abroad?
Chinatown, to me, means today a group of people living together and helping each other.
Today, Chinatown represents actually a place where recent immigrants go to do their shopping.
Chinatown, these areas were seen as culturally rich. You went in there were different things, exotic things, different foods. It was a lot of fun.
And what are the current fashion platforms in China?
What brands in China need to do is to find out more about their customer.
I think Chinese customer is the least loyal customer in the world, you know?
Now, right before the break, we were talking about... I don't know what we're talking about.
Join dialogue anchor Young Ray and Jennifer Shun for their discussions with Chinese and foreign experts to see how dress code in China, Chinatowns, and fashion in modern China is evolving in this special series for Chinese New Year, only on Dialogue.
To take a look at the new image of Chinatowns in the West, I'm very happy to be joined again by our old friends, Harvey Zording, Anna Tangen, and Charles Liu. Look, this is the Spring Festival special program of Dialogue. We're talking about Chinatown, and Chinatown actually is a loaded concept with a lot of implications about history, the realities, business, bilateral relationship, geopolitics, image of the new generation, science and technology. Let's pick one of the interesting points here. Harvey, what do you think should be the most interesting point to start with about the new image of Chinatown?
I think that the Chinatowns are changing, that they're becoming much more modern, much more upscale, by and large, across America anyway, and this is both good and bad. Good because more people feel comfortable to go there. Bad because it's a gentrification that means that some people will have to leave because it's too expensive. If you look at the New York Chinatowns, the three of them that I know about, all those areas have become gentrified. It means that people can't stay who've lived there for generations.
When we merely look at the image of Chinatown, we have three concepts, and I wonder if you agree with me. The physical shape of Chinatown, functions including services, Chinese food restaurants, barbers, or the people who live and work in Chinatown, or who refuse to live in Chinatown any longer, but they are Chinese, they are the new immigrants. So Anna, which one would come first in the pecking order that impressed you most?
Well, in the past, it was a place where there were sweatshops where women were paid very, very poorly, worked in horrible conditions, and were turning out cloth and dresses and things like that. Today, and Harvey, it's changed a lot, believe me. These are centers for new tech. They've moved out. The factories that were once there are now gone. The textile industry has moved away. But, you know, Chinatown is, you know, it's a bittersweet memory of what it was, okay? Yes, it was a vehicle which housed them while they were coming together, but it was also a place of great pain, sorrow, suffering. Now, today, it's completely different, and part of that is being driven by China's rise. Not only China, but Asia. The wealth line continues to move eastward, and that includes Korea, Japan, Southeast Asia, you name it.
Right, with China's rapid economic expansion, today China is a word on the lips of so many people in different forums throughout the whole world. That doesn't come as a big surprise. However, Chinatown has become a tourist attraction, very popular tourist attraction. Therefore, there must be some hallmarks typical of Chinese culture, such as Chinese food, traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, or body massage, so to speak. Now, when we look at the TCM, that's a very controversial issue, right?
It's proven that it works. For example, anesthetics using acupuncture, it's proven it's work. And it works. And I would only say to those detractors that I'm sorry, it's just that your science is not sophisticated enough to understand why it works, but it works.
Is it because it's based on the philosophy and the Chinese belief of maintaining equilibrium between yin and yang? What we call TCM is actually based on the flow of energy through the body points.
Well, the whole history of Chinese medicine versus Western medicine is that Western medicine was developed on the basis of dead people, cadavers,
and
dissecting.
Through thousands of experiments.
Right.
A lot of
Whereas the Chinese health or healing is based on trial with live people.
Yeah. It's a 3,000-year period of field testing. So it does work. I mean, a lot of the energy that is termed in the East, in the West, we'd say it's the nervous system. And that it's proven that there's currents running through. This is how our synapses work and things like that. So it's not this mystical thing. And sometimes I get upset about that because in the United States, unfortunately, traditional Chinese medicine is kind of becoming part of a joke. It's being accepted. But the people who are practicing it, aren't required to have even a college degree.
That's right.
And yet, in 2 years, you get a master's. And in this master's, you know everything. You know herbs, qigong, you know tuina, acupuncture. You're supposed to know all of these things. To do this in China, it would take much longer. You'd have to have your college, you'd have to go through the school, you'd have to specialize, and you things. So, I really objected to this, and I personally tried to make sure that there was a higher level of designation that would be approved and be managed under the Chinese system. But it unfortunately failed.
Even today, my daughter is studying Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, 5 years. This is a long time to study, and it's a very intensive program. Even in her first year, a lot of people have dropped out. I think the key to the TCM is, we call it in the West, complementary medicine. So Chinese medicine is here and Western medicine is here, but there are places where it meets together. And I think this is what needs to be explored further. And I have a very interesting story about TCM, my own story. The first time I went to a traditional Chinese medicine doctor in Flushing, a Taiwanese friend took me, and the doctor gave me all these herbs and things. But nobody told me that I was supposed to make a soup out of it. So I ate these bird feathers and leaves. It was awful, awful. So TCM needs to do a better job of promoting itself in the West.
Go back to the issue of the job of the new generation in the United States. They graduated from MIT, Harvard, Princeton, Columbia, Yale. These guys are brilliant, and if you don't have a quota system in Harvard, 99.9% would be Chinese students in the Department of Mathematics.
Mathematics, maybe.
Mathematics, yes.
But there are wonderful Indian mathematicians and also from Eastern Europe. I think this is one of the myths that are always perpetuated on this kind of...
What about political participation? We've been, one of the first few shows on Dialogue in the early days of this program in 1999 was espionage saga Wen Heli from Taiwan. The Chinese American was sentenced to years of imprisonment only to be found innocent. And so the judge apologized, saying, "You are innocent, we made stupid mistakes." That said, one lawmaker in the DC said to me in the conversation on Dialogue, "Look, had we have as many African-American lawmakers in the D.C., such stories would not have happened, because we would have enjoyed a very strong voice of protest in the D.C. at the Capitol Hill. Because this is racial discrimination," she said. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Except that for the Chinese in the United States, for generations, they're told not to stick your head out. They're told to be absolutely model citizens. They're told, don't fight the white man. Not in those words, but basically that's what it means. Because you find that Chinese are much more pragmatic. Even for those who are second generation, third generation in the United States, many of them feel this is not their homeland. And so many Chinese Americans are moving back to Beijing, moved to Shanghai.
I was the highest-ranking political appointee in the state of Wisconsin. All right, I was at the apex in terms of Asians and political power. So, I would hear from people when I'd say, here we have a state where the top 1% is Asian, and I mean in education, all right, in income, right? Doctorate degrees, advanced education. We dominated the intellectual institutions, universities, graduate schools. Yet in the administration of these schools, there was only one guy, a very good friend of mine. And I would go to the presidents, I'd go to the governor, I'd say, listen, what gives? How is it possible that the top 1% is not qualified? They can teach, but they can't administrate. And they'd say, oh, they're good guys, but they don't want it. They don't want it. They don't want to have the power. They don't want to have the fuss, the headaches. They don't like politics. So this was always the excuse.
Thank you, everybody. Harvey, Anna, and Charles, you are watching Dialogue. In fact, it's our Spring Festival special program of Dialogue. We're talking about the new image of Chinatown and the new image of the Chinese immigration in the United States. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Charles, what do you want to say about political participation? You said they don't want to showcase, they don't want to show off, they want to keep a low profile. And Deng Xiaoping said we should not, get reported prominently in world media. We should, concentrate on our domestic economic rebuilding instead of being self-inflated. What do you think of these warnings?
Well, I think that warning aside, coming back to the Chinese in the United States, it's very interesting that when the reform and the opening up of China took place in the late 70s, the first to start coming back with business, with trade, were overseas Chinese. They still consider this their home. The cultural ingrain is so deep that second, third generation even feel that this is their home. America is not their home. It is really quite interesting here. And this is the issue with being in America. Chinese Americans always feel that, okay, we're Chinese Americans, but opportunities now, more and more of them are coming to China because we're also Chinese. We may be American citizens.
But this is not an unusual phenomenon because,
right.
If you have the Irish, they come, they're impoverished, or the Italians, they come, they're very poor, they go for a few generations, but after about the third or fourth generation, there's this desire to understand your roots,
right.
To understand where you come from. So they start going back, some of them bring business and do things, but it's the sense of trying to rediscover where you came from and where you are, because the U.S. is a great melting pot. But then there's this question about what does it mean?
It's not a melting pot. It's a stew because, as we've discussed yesterday and today, the cultures have not really come together. And I think it's different. China and Ireland, I think, are different. Yes, maybe people want to go back to Ireland to learn about their roots, but they don't live in Ireland. People from China in large waves, whether they're students who didn't used to go back and go back now, or people with great talent, do come back to China to live for several reasons. I think two of the reasons are that the Chinese government has made it easier and easier for those people to come back and actually has sought them out. And two, they're increasing their efforts now with this high-value visa to bring people back of great achievement to China. I think it's working, and I've seen the support the Chinese government gives to entrepreneurs, to scientists, and people who are achieving great things, to give them benefits and offices and laboratories, and I think it's smart. So in America, we're cutting back on science and things. In China, you're really grabbing this bull by the horns and going for it.
Well, there are many currents that occur in China. The H-1B visa program is oversubscribed, and many of them are Chinese. So it's not exactly, you can't make a generalization. I mean, China's large, and the people here follow many different currents.
Political participation again. The United States is a nation of immigration. With so many Chinese students studying in North America, do you think more of them would choose to get naturalized and to be immigrants so that one day they are politically determined to be part of the American society. They would be one of the lawmakers, they would perhaps
it's
run for
unlikely.
presidency one day. Their
I
children.
think it's unlikely.
Third or fourth generation, yes,
Yeah.
but the
Look
kids.
at Gary Locke, and who else?
Yes, but he's exactly that. He's third generation. So,
Yeah.
but what I see, and you can speak to this, is the friends whose children are going abroad now. They want to go to the U.S. Some of them are interested in a green card, but they don't necessarily intend to stay there for the rest of their life. They want to get a career, some experience. They want to travel and enjoy life. But most of them, in the back of their mind, there's a sense that I have aging parents, I'm an only child, I will eventually come back to China, or in some cases, move their parents there. The difficulty there is they move their parents, whether it's Australia or somewhere else. It sounds great, but their parents are cut off.
Right. And they hate it.
And they hate it.
You guys give
The
different
food's terrible.
reasons behind the lackluster performance of politics. Let's look at education. Do you think education, family education, education of the culture have played an important role in shaping the mind of the Chinese about politics?
Well, I think they do, and I know for a fact that the students who come back from the U.S., from the U.K., from Australia, have a different perception about society and what the norms should be. And this will be an increasing change issue as China becomes more and more middle class. You cannot deny that. Right now, the situation is necessary, but change will occur. And part of it will be due to these outside influences.
Yeah, change. That's the word for dynamics of Chinese culture and politics.
But there
What
is
about-
lack of participation, coming back to the point which you were pursuing time and again, is why is it that they don't participate in politics in the United States? And I think America being a country of immigrants, when you're physically different, you're identifiable. Anybody who walks on the street, if he looks Chinese, even though I can speak perfect English, probably better than a lot of Americans, are you from China? You know, are you from Japan? You're from Korea? It's very, very difficult for society, as we're beginning to find now with President Donald Trump, for society to really have that whole holistic integration of many nationalities.
Are you alluding to racial discrimination because of the rise of the KKK and populism in the United States?
Well, no.
It's just that people are different, I think.
Yeah, they are.
I remember I had a sociology final when I was in college, and the question was a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt. I don't remember the quote exactly, but the gist of it was, we will not have racial equality in our country for 500 years until everybody intermarries with everybody else. And I think that's kind of true.
Exactly.
I think it's very true. I don't think we're going to have it.
I disagree. I mean, tribalism exists on so many levels, and there's this...
It's not tribalism, it's racism.
Yes,
It's a
okay.
kind of tribalism.
The fact is that for the Irish and Italians, they look differently, and when they walked down the street, no one wanted to have anything to do with them, and they weren't allowed in. They had to build their political machines themselves. Tammany Hall was a boss system. The Italians had their own ways of garnering power. The Chinese never went through that. First off, the numbers weren't there. Second, they felt that they were constrained. If they tried to make a move, as you said, this would be very dangerous. But that has changed today. You're starting to see, you mentioned Gary Locke, he's third generation, but you had Inuit from Hawaii. You have a number of Asian Americans who are starting to step up politically. There are also greater numbers of Asians who are going to law school. This was verboten 30 years ago. Literally, I was the only one there. No, I was expected. I was a son.
A few years ago, a survey was conducted about the image of China, asking whether Confucius or Zhang Ziyi represents China, because she played a role and she won big for performing an important role in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Oscar winner. So the issue is Kung Fu. Now we have the Hollywood blockbuster of Kung Fu Panda, we have Mulan, and everything is about Kung Fu. Bruce Lee, for example, Jack Lee.
Jackie Chan.
Jackie Chan, sorry. Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan. But these are powerful symbols of martial arts. Do you think China is still remembered more for Kung Fu instead of for our schools?
Instead of having huge manufacturing capacity and a huge
technological
currency reserve. No, This is all the result of Hollywood. You're basically promoting something that can sell. And all of this is because it can sell and therefore was promoted. I think, you know, people would enjoy these shows, but this is just that, entertainment.
But there's a big problem with Hollywood. It's what we call whitewashing.
Yeah.
You still have the problem today where a Chinese actor or actress can't always get big parts. And that's why you have a Scarlett Johansson playing an Asian person. This is disgusting. And it goes to the racism that we talked about before. It's been the history of Hollywood. I think that martial arts in China are something that's admirable, but I think Charles is right. It's been displaced by the Chinese accomplishments in so many other fields.
I'm going to disagree with you completely because the thing I care about is Jack Ma on top of Alibaba, which is leading the world in things, Tencent, the accomplishments that are being made. If you have politicians, I'm more concerned about how many politicians you have who are Asian and understand the Asian experience and can represent it than whether or not somebody's being played in Hollywood.
No, I think it's important because Hollywood is important.
It's pictures. It's not
reality.
reality.
Going to your point about politics, most, with exceptions like Gary Locke, most of the politicians elected in America are from the populations that have high percentage or areas of Asians. That has not changed in a long time. It's a slow change.
Hollywood won't have easy access to Chinese market unless you have a Chinese role in the movie, right? And it's so commercial. But that helps, don't you think, to promote the image of China? And the Chinese guy in the movie should not be demonized, should not play a villain. He should be a good guy, right?
They should be good, they should be bad, they should just be people.
No, they should be good actors, and that's the issue. You're talking about a business that's all about box office. It's about numbers and things like that. I really can't get that excited about Hollywood when I see what I see is much more important.
Then you're missing part of the picture,
well, that's fine.
Because people take their cues from Hollywood, whether it's on a small screen or a big screen.
You think they take
more looking at box office, you're missing the point.
I think Hollywood impacts different segments of the population differently. There are those who are more sophisticated, but of course if you have several hundred congressmen who's never traveled abroad, have no idea what's outside, then they take Hollywood portrayal of things much more seriously. I think every society has different segments of the population. And in the United States, unfortunately, there is a very large mass of population who are not very worldly, not very sophisticated, and then they take what is portrayed in Hollywood as the Word of God, unfortunately.
Well, Chinatown also has some implications of tax evasion, money laundering, mafia, but
so
let's adopt a forward-looking attitude. Forward-looking attitude, Charles and Harvey. What do you think are the most impressive words in Chinese vocabulary about the merits and integrity of the Chinese? Because we are developing very fast. There must be a reason other than globalization and dividends of labor force. So what do you think are the keywords in having a better understanding about the competitive edge of Chinese culture and Chinese economy?
I'm going to put it a slightly different way. I'm Jewish. Chinese people are the Jews of the 21st century. You're the achievers, the hard workers, the success stories beyond your numbers. It's so impressive.
And above all, the Chinese are never known for being anti-Semitic in history. We have Chinese Schindlers. What are your thoughts?
I think really it's this desire to give back to society. I was very impressed. You know, there's a consistent theme in each party Congress which says, look, we're going to not rise separately. We're going to try to rise together as a community. The second is planning. The ability of the government to plan and execute over a long period of time has been the decisive factor versus democracies which can change as the leadership changes. So those two things, the willingness to invest into society to make it better and more equal, and planning.
But what about the drawbacks of our culture that may prevent more of the Chinese from being politicians in the West?
The biggest conflict in terms of, I wouldn't call it philosophy, well basically thesis of being for society, the biggest conflict between China and the West is the West is principles-based. Whatever happens,
rule-based as well.
Rule based on principles.
Mm-hmm.
It's principles-based. Whereas in China, it's pragmatic. Is white cat, black cat, whatever cat catches mouse. Now, what we see is in 30 years, the per capita GDP went from $1 above India to 500% of India. What we see is 600 million people lived out of poverty, even though by Western standards, we may not have been wholly abiding by their universal principles.
We have our own principle. Our principle is that the poverty is not the hallmark of socialism. That's what Deng Xiaoping said.
Okay, and Xi Jinping said there will be no poverty by 2020.
Not a single one should be left behind in our poverty alleviation campaign by 2020.
They will do it, and you see it, just like what we saw in terms of the environmental protection. It's been absolutely phenomenal.
I'm interested, yes. I mean, in theory, it's about principle. But I would argue that in the West, there's many violations of those very principles.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody. We seem to have deviated from the central theme of Chinatown. But this is a good talk. It's a very lively chat. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.